I'm Maryn.
And I'm Christie.
And you're listening to Hung, a podcast where we talk about true crime from the court of law to the court of public opinion. Great. Well, we got an email the other day asking us to do a JonBenet Ramsey case, which was super nice. I love that somebody wanted to suggest something, but did have to tell them, oh, so sorry, that doesn't really fit.
I mean, it's hard because you have true crime where there are stories of these crimes that were committed and the stuff surrounding them, but if it never goes to trial, it doesn't really fit into what we're doing.
Yes, and we can maybe look into doing one-offs of that every now and then.
Yeah.
But for the moment, I like our setup how it is, and I think that's kind of what we're settling into and getting used to doing. But that being said, if any of you listening have any suggestions of cases you would want to hear, more specifically, at the moment, cases that were, I guess I've been kind of describing it as a controversial case, a wrongful conviction, a wrongful acquittal. And then even if there's one that might be not super big out there, but was controversial in your hometown or your whatever, we will do our best to see if we can get info on that. If you are new here, this is your first listen with us, welcome. A little intro into what we do here at Hung. My mom here, Christie. Obviously, she introduces herself, but I feel like I can't call her Christie or it feels weird. So, Mom. Yeah. She takes the case and looks at it strictly from either trial footage, if we can find that, or trial transcript edited to exclude anything that the jury didn't hear. So she's basically juror 13 over here, determining what her verdict would be after hearing the case as the jury heard it.
Right. So I'd go through describing what my understanding is of the case as it's going through the different witnesses. So if you've heard about a case outside of this setting, you may have heard it told differently because they're telling the story as a whole and maybe telling stuff that's known that didn't make it into court and things like that. But this is a more like following my process through the case in the courtroom and my understanding as it develops. And, that's really not the full picture because there's only certain things that make it into court. So
yeah, and everything is not necessarily chronological in a trial. So the way that a jury actually would hear it. After we talk about that, she'll give her verdict, and then we'll go to my side of things, and we'll hear everything that either didn't make it into the court, public opinion on it, and just random other tidbits if I can find them.
Right. And then kind of see if I had known some of that stuff, might I have come to a different verdict? Yeah, so that's what we do. And Maryn comes up with some interesting things that I really enjoy hearing about. So I hope that people give her episodes a listen as well.
But today we are doing Russ Faria, which... let's see, you can intro that.
You want me to intro? Okay.
Yeah.
So Russ Faria has been charged with first-degree murder of his wife, Betsy Faria, in December of 2011, and it went to trial in 2013.
And what state? It's
in Missouri.
Missouri versus Russ Faria?
Yeah. Russ Faria. Okay. This is our first time doing a transcript only case where I did not actually hear the testimony, but instead read the testimony. And I have to say there's some advantages to that because I'm a fast reader, so I can get through a trial much quicker than I can when I'm listening to a video of it. I'm a big reader anyway, so being able to hear in my mind, and I kind of feel like I'm there. So this is just my visualization of how the conversations went, and I feel like I can get the vibe of how it was in real life. But again, that's also just my imagination, so there may be some things that I'm not correct about that seem or feel a certain way. So just adding that caveat in there.
Definitely. I think, like, there are times when we've had video where you've been able to say, like, the way that they interacted, you could tell they didn't really like each other, or they seemed annoyed, or whatever, which you could probably still make inferences by the things that were said, but not in the same exact way.
Yeah, I have to say there was some real drama at moments in this trial, and I can imagine, like, in person that it would have been pretty tense and a lot of just, like, the prosecution questioning and saying this, and then the defense saying, and getting back up there and doing this, and then the prosecution getting back up and and I'm just like, whoa, y'all are just going crazy, you know? And some direct digs at each other, which is kind of interesting too.
Okay, my interest is piqued.
Yeah. Okay, so the states or the prosecution, their story goes a little something like this. A man calls 911 to report his wife has committed suicide. It becomes evident pretty quickly that this is not a suicide. Why do they suspect it's not a suicide? Well, first of all, there is a knife jammed all the way into her neck. Oof. And a lot of people commit suicide using a knife or something like that, but usually it's not someone stabbing a knife all the way into their neck. She also has 2 slashed wrists, and one of her wrists is slashed so deeply that it almost severs her hand from her arm.
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine someone being able to do that to themselves.
And then stab
themselves in the neck. Right? Yeah. And it was her right hand that was almost severed. And because of how much it was cut, it wasn't doing anything.
Right.
You know, it could have flopped around or something, at the end of her hand, but there's no grabbing, there's no stabbing with that hand for sure. Okay. And also, those wounds are almost bloodless. So that indicated to the first responders and everybody else that was involved in the case that those wounds had actually been made after she was already dead.
Post-mortem.
Yes, post-mortem injury.
Someone wanted it to look like a suicide?
Potentially. The fact that you have sliced wrists, like, that does fit with, okay, people cut their wrists to commit suicide. Now, the degree of those slices was uncharacteristic of someone committing suicide, right?
And then the knife in the neck is not like, oh yeah, this is suicidal thing.
Right. And then when they look further, she has a total of 56 stab wounds. She's not doing that to herself.
No.
I don't think so.
No.
I'm like, ow, 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 ow.
Yeah, I know.
Slice my hand almost off, stab myself in the neck. I mean, that's like, no, that does not fit with suicide. And to be fair, she was wearing a black shirt. He probably couldn't see that she had been stabbed in the chest and all of that when he found her. But
was she stabbed in the front or the back?
Both.
Okay.
But all on the left side.
Okay. So I was also wondering,
the majority of her torso and stuff was on the left side, and her head and neck area.
Was she on her stomach? Was she on her back when he walked in? Because if most of it's in the front or most of it's in the back, would make a difference too.
Right. It seems like she wasn't laying on her back. I'm not sure if she was laying on her stomach. She might have been more laying on her side, curled up kind of. That's actually what I think it is. And so, those stabs would have been, I believe, on that side that was up.
Gotcha. Okay.
Through the arm, the neck, the head. Yeah. Yeah, it was brutal. Okay, they say the defense is going to tell you that Russ has an alibi, that he went to these locations, he has receipts, he's on surveillance, he has friends who are testifying that he was with them, but we're going to show you that that alibi does not hold up. And rather than exonerating him, it actually implicates him in her death, meaning that this was not a crime of passion. It had to have been something that was carefully thought out, planned ahead of time, and carried through. So that makes this premeditated, cold-blooded, first-degree murder.
Right, because I guess if you have an alibi, it's one of two things. It's real, or if it's not real, then it's intentionally placed, which is not a good sign. I guess it could be pre-planned or post-incident, somebody being like, oh, I'll help you out.
Right. So why? Why would he do it? The state has to answer that question as well. They say this was a tumultuous relationship. There are reports of domestic violence, tension in the home. Betsy has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Though that might seem like she's going to die anytime, they're actually giving her 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
So it's not rapidly terminal. She has 3 life insurance policies totaling between $300,000 and $400,000. That seems like a pretty low price to me to put on somebody's life, to say, I need to kill them.
Especially if they're terminal, so you'll get it anyway when they die.
Right. So the state's position is that she was getting her affairs in order and that she was planning on changing the beneficiary on those life insurance policies, or there was risk that maybe she was going to change things, and so she needed to die before those changes happened.
I see.
Okay, so that's the state's story in a nutshell.
Okay,
the defense's story is this is a tragedy. That a man comes home to find his wife brutally murdered. What he sees when he comes in the door are slashed wrists and a knife in his wife's neck. She's been diagnosed with terminal cancer. She'd already survived breast cancer 2 years prior, thought she was in remission, and has just learned 2 months earlier that it's back and she's terminal. She was depressed. There was a previous suicide attempt. So he sees slashed wrists, a knife, and he thinks, oh my gosh, she has committed suicide. Now, he was wrong in his conclusion, but based on his previous experience, it makes sense that he drew that conclusion. He's not a trained paramedic. And so, yes, he was wrong in his conclusion, but it makes sense. Like, there are other people who might also have drawn that conclusion based on the circumstances. They say, hey, Russ was not trying to establish an alibi. He shared with the detectives, hey, here's what I did, here's where I went. They went to check on his story and they found him on surveillance video, receipts from those locations. He didn't get himself on camera. He happened to be captured on camera. And all of that supported the story that he was telling them.
I mean, that's a line there where you have to use other things to determine, right? Because there are definitely cases of people who are seen in a lot of places because they want to establish, I was out here, look, I did this weird thing and they'll remember me and whatever, you know?
Right. Yeah. And then the defense says, as soon as 911 is called and they arrive on scene, Russ is in the presence of law enforcement for the next 48 hours. While he's in custody, his friends that he was with that night, they're being interviewed. They're corroborating his story that he was with them. And they're interviewed multiple times and their stories remain consistent. So Russ should be eliminated as a suspect. Everything points to he wasn't there. He didn't do this. And the defense says when you hear all of the evidence, you're going to see that this doesn't add up to Russ killed his wife.
All right. That's all good talk. Right?
I know. Sometimes I feel like you listen to the opening statements and you're like, okay, you know, oh, I see it. Wow. All right. And then you get into it and you're like, I don't think that's exactly the way you presented it to me in opening statements. So it's always interesting to see, does the evidence actually support this story that they told in the beginning? Because they're very good storytellers and they're both telling pretty convincing versions of the story.
And they both either are or act convinced of their story. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is with opening statements is it's kind of the bar that they set, especially prosecution, right? Because they're the ones with the burden of proof.
Right.
So I don't know, sometimes it's like they set the expectation and you have to decide, okay, did they deliver on that expectation? Because whatever they say in opening statements is not argument, it's not evidence, it's not what you consider when you, besides, man, did they do what they said they were going to do?
Right. Yep, exactly. And sometimes I think, man, you want to be careful not to set the bar too high, because then if it doesn't seem to show that, you're like, I feel like you said you were going to show this, but I don't think that it shows that.
Right. And then also listening to it too, your thought process should also be, okay, if you can prove that to me, that's pretty convincing. If you have the evidence behind those statements, okay, that's compelling.
Yeah.
But then they have to do that.
Right. So. Definitely. Okay, so the first two witnesses are Betsy's daughters. So Betsy had two girls from a prior relationship. She met and married Russ when her daughters were 5 and 7 years old. So when Mariah, the younger daughter, gets on the stand and she's asked who Russ is, she said, "That's my dad." Well, I mean, I guess he raised me. Okay, I guess technically he is not my dad, but he is my dad, right?
Right. How old are they now, do you know?
She was a junior in high school when the event occurred.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But both girls, understandably emotional, and this was really hard for them to give testimony about this. So the youngest daughter, she initially moved out with them to Troy and went to school a couple months there, didn't like it. And so she moved in with her grandmother, and she was going to her old high school. And her mom would stay out at her grandma's house 3 to 4 days a week. Her chemotherapy was out in that area. So days that she was going to have chemo, she would be out there the night before and maybe the night after. So it seems like she was kind of half-time living in Troy with Russ and half-time living with her mom and her daughter. So she describes their home life as a lot of bickering and fighting, which that doesn't sound like an abnormal family, especially when you have kids in the house and things like that. The prosecutor asks a little bit more, what do you mean by lots of bickering and fighting? And she then says, a lot of cussing at each other, yelling across the house. Mostly that was cussing aimed at her mom, but sometimes aimed at the girls. Which, that doesn't sound like a normal... Well, hopefully that's not the normal household.
Sure. There are probably plenty of houses with bickering that don't end in what happened here.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Well, she's asked, was there anything that stood out to you as being a little different about this Christmas? And she says, well, Russ gave us $100 each, my sister and I, and that was not the norm. He was pretty tight with money, and that also he wanted to do a family portrait in the house that Christmas morning. And she said, normally, sure, there were pictures taken of people opening presents and things like that, but not okay, everyone sit here. And he had a camera on a tripod and a 10-second timer, and they had the dog in the picture and everything too. So yeah, that wasn't normal. We usually didn't do that. The prosecutor also asks about the vehicles that they owned. They had 3 cars, a PT Cruiser, an Explorer, and a Nissan. And mom usually drove either the Explorer or the Nissan. And the Nissan, her older sister and her mom were both on the title for that car. But Leah, the older sister, had gotten in trouble and she'd been grounded from the car. And so now mom was mostly driving that car, which seemed to me, I'm like, seems like a little bit of a slap in the face. You can't drive your car. Okay, now I'm driving around in it, and but that picture changes a little bit when the defense comes and cross-examines. So she also says that Christmas Day they spent together, and then they were going and seeing the different parts of the family. But on the 26th of December, Mariah had the flu really bad. And so she went to the hospital. I'm assuming she was just vomiting a lot, and so maybe she needed some sort of IV hydration or something like that.
Well, I feel like my gauge of what people take their kids to the hospital for and what we were taken to the hospital for are
nothing.
Are different.
Like, it's not that bad.
It's not, and it's not a criticism, but I just think, well, if you've been listening, my mom's a nurse, my dad's a doctor. So there are times when people who don't have medical knowledge would take their kids because they're like, well, I don't know, you're sick. We should take you to the hospital. Whereas if you're in the medical field, you'd be like, this is not something you need to go to the hospital for.
Right. So,
and
sometimes on the side of maybe we should have, but we thought, it's fine. Well, I should say Dad thought, it's fine.
Yeah. Maybe there are things where he's like, well, do this first. If you don't ice it first, they're just going to tell you to ice it. So you might as well do this first, things like that. So yeah. I think sometimes like, oh, wow, they took her to the hospital. That was really serious. But it could also just mean they just took her to the hospital because they weren't sure if it was serious or not or whatever.
Right. Betsy and her mom had gone over to the hospital, but then Betsy decided, you know what, there's a lot of sick people in there. She's doing chemo, so she is immunosuppressed. They decide, you know what, probably not a good idea for you to go in there. So they go back to her mom's house, and Mariah comes back to her grandma's house that evening. They spend the night there together. The next day, her mom had chemo scheduled, and so she did that, and then she ended up going back to the house in Troy on the evening of the 27th. And she notes before she left to go back to Troy that...
This is the evening that she died, was the 27th?
Correct, yeah, the 27th. That she was playing a game with her mom and a friend, and she just seemed to Mariah to be worn out, tired,
That's
not really happy.
Normal, well, I would assume the tired part was kind of normal after chemo, right?
Right, and that was it for the direct examination. So the state in their opening, they also painted this picture of Betsy gets diagnosed with cancer and Russ moves them away from all of their family and friends and takes her out to Troy, away from her support system, away from her doctor, all of that. Almost like a controlling husband might, trying to cut you off from people that matter to you.
Sure, the second time you get cancer. First time, though, I've learned from the first time.
That's right. Too many people, too helpful.
Well, do they have a reason that they went to Troy?
Yeah, and that's what the defense kind of shows, like, okay, the way that you made that sound is different than the reality. So they had been living in Betsy's dad's home, and they had been trying to purchase that home, and it had gone into foreclosure, and they weren't able to come up with the funds or do whatever was required to get it out of foreclosure, and so they had to move out of that house. And they found a house in Troy that they could afford, and it had more space. And so they had moved out there. So it's kind of like, well, they would have liked to stay where they were, and they did everything they could to try and stay where they were, and that just didn't happen. And then you have to, well, what can you buy? And here's what we could buy. And it happened to be 30 minutes away from where they'd been living before.
Yeah, that's one of the things where I'm like not trying to say anything on one side or the other, but one of those things where it's like, if you're going to say it as a lawyer, if it's going to come back on you and not, and like be like, well, no, there's a reason for that, then you probably just shouldn't say it. Now you could say this was a contributing factor, that they just happened to be away from her support system, and maybe it exacerbated circumstances that were already present. But to say oh, he moved them away to do
Right.
this thing when there's a perfectly good reason that they did so. Why do that? Why, on both sides, on the
Yeah.
defense's side, on the prosecutor's side,
Yeah.
when people do things like that, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, it actually just looks worse on you than if you didn't say anything at all.
Yeah. And this trial, I feel like, is big on two extremely different perspectives of the same data,
Sure.
right? And so it's a tug of war of like, no, it means this. And the other one, no, it means this. And, back and forth. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. The defense, or sometimes the prosecution, that I'm like, hold on, like, yeah, y'all be crazy.
And the truth might sometimes just be in the middle somewhere.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about the car situation, and it just seemed weird that Mariah was saying, like, oh, she either drove the Explorer or the Nissan, but once Leah was grounded or whatever, once she wasn't able to drive that car, then Betsy was mostly driving the Nissan. And it seemed like, why would she do that? But when the defense attorney is questioning Mariah, it comes up that the PT Cruiser had some mechanical problem or something. So that's usually the car that Russ drove, but he wasn't able to drive it because it had problems. And so he was driving the Explorer, which then put Betsy driving the Nissan. So it was more a matter of need than it was a matter of choice. And it does kind of come into play later on with his alibi witnesses and what they're reporting, which vehicle he's driving does kind of matter. So
Okay.
keep that in mind. So then she gets into, which I think this has got to be something that they decided in advance had to be excluded, but the defense is trying to get it in at least a little bit, and maybe people can draw some conclusions from what he's saying without saying it. That actually kind of bothers me when it's like, well, you can't say it. Okay, well, I'm not going to say it, but I'm going to kind of say it without saying it, So I'm like, okay, either you can say it or not say it, right?
Was there a redacted material right after that?
No, there wasn't, but, I'm sure this is in like a pre-trial conference or something that they had decided, okay,
Right.
you can't bring this in or whatever. But
Well,
he says, did Leah, the older sister, did she move in with them at that time? No. And then he says, why didn't Leah move in with them? Oh, wait. Well, let's do it this way. Because obviously the reason she didn't move in with them is something that has been decided can't be brought into court. Mm-hmm. And he says, okay, let's do it this way. Leah was having issues of her own, correct? Issues, right?
well, she was in trouble.
Right. She couldn't have her car. Probably, yeah. All right, so Leah was kind of getting help for her issues? Yes. Okay, she's in treatment of some kind. Is the implication. So it's kind of like, all right, you can't bring in the fact that she's in drug treatment or alcohol treatment or something like that. Maybe she was driving under the influence or something where now she can't drive her car. And so,
Well, it's weird that they would care when it's about Leah, though, so...
right. So it is weird. Like, I feel like the defense in this case is a lot of, well, maybe this person did it, maybe this person did it. And we know Leah couldn't have done it because Leah has a rock solid alibi during that time. But
Or does
it's
she?
still, right? It's still like, yes, but she had issues, didn't she? It's like, okay,
Sure.
So he brings her back to the original diagnosis of breast cancer in 2009. And then approximately a year later, they think she's cured. It's gone into remission. October of 2011, they discovered that it's metastasized to her liver. And the defense attorney asked, did they tell you that they only thought she had a certain amount of time to live? Well, a certain amount of time? Whatever that may be. And she's like, oh, well, I don't know. She was supposed to have this appointment to find out if the treatment was working or not, but she never
Got to it.
got to that appointment because she was dead. But the last information she had was that, yes, they thought it was terminal because it had spread to her liver. And he says, okay, yes, there was maybe this tumultuous relationship that they'd had in the past, but once she was diagnosed with cancer, didn't that get a lot better? And she says, I couldn't tell you that. And then, he goes on to like, well, didn't she play tennis all the time? And that's why she would stay at her mom's. She played almost every day. And where she played tennis, her mom's house was closer to that. And then she had her doctor's appointments, so she would stay there for that reason. So kind of like, well, she wasn't staying there to get away from Russ, but she never said that she was staying there to get away from Russ. Her daughter was there, and her doctor was there. So I didn't feel like her being at her mom's house half the time was implying a bad relationship with Russ, but that's, just me. I didn't think so. And so then this is more trying to make sure everyone knows that she wasn't trying to get away from Russ. She was doing all these other things, and that's why she was there. And she's like, well, I mean, yeah, she played a lot of tennis, not every day, but, whatever. And she'd also stay there the days that she had chemo. And then he points out that, yeah, well, maybe you didn't always take pictures at Christmas time, but isn't this the first Christmas that you had in this house? And she says, yes. And then your mom's just been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Maybe this is going to be your last Christmas. You never know. So maybe that's another reason why he wanted to take a picture of them all together. That's a good point.
Yes, maybe he knew.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, so that was the end of her testimony. And then they call the older sister, and boy, she had a hard time holding it together. She starts out like she's doing okay. They go through things like how old she was when her mom married Russ and where they lived, kind of what she's doing now. So they're kind of trying to set her at ease by going through some of these things. And then she goes to the family dynamics in the house, wanting her to describe that. The attorney, I guess, in prior conversation, like deposition or whatever with Leah, had made a reference to Leave It to Beaver, and she didn't know what that was. And so the prosecutor had kind of explained it to her. And then her response was, well, it wasn't the Brady Bunch. So she says, well, what do you mean by that?
Like their home life?
Yes, their home life. And she said just a lot of bickering and fighting. And, okay, well, your sister said there was a lot of cussing that was towards your mom and sometimes towards you. And she says, yeah, that's true. And that he would call her sometimes the C word, and it was directed at her. And then the prosecutor asked, was it also directed at your mom? And at this point, she seemed to be just kind of starting to get overwhelmed because she's saying, I don't know. And then the prosecutor wants to bring up a story about something that happened with the family dog. And they'd referenced this briefly in their opening statements about how there was this domestic violence type of situation between them, and that it had even extended towards violence towards the dog. And so she starts to ask about, okay, can you tell the jury about the situation in regards to the dog? And she just is like, I don't want to do this. I really don't. I don't want to do this. She just falls apart. And so they have a discussion at the bench. And then the prosecutor comes back and said, okay, well, you were here during your sister's testimony. The events that she described from that period of Christmas Eve to the 27th, would your answers be any different than what Mariah's were? And she says they would be the same. So pretty much like ditto to everything that Mariah said, because she's just not seeming to be capable of going through all of that questioning.
And they never say what happened with the dog?
No, yeah, they never say what happened with the dog.
I'll have to look that up, see if I can find it.
Yeah. So she does say, okay, so the things that were different about that Christmas, and did say, okay, yeah, just the money in the picture, like she said. And yeah, that was different. And do you remember what your mom got for Christmas? And she'd gotten this big jewelry box, like one of those that has a bunch of drawers and stands up like shoulder height or something, pretty tall. And then it's standing on furniture legs, up off the floor. Yes, exactly. She had gotten that jewelry box for, they are calling it a box, but it seems like I'm picturing jewelry box, like a little jewelry box. And they say, well, here's a picture. Is this the jewelry box that she got? Yes. And is there anything different about it? Yeah, the leg's broken off. And one of the legs is broken off and there are chips in it. And I'm picturing like a little girl's jewelry box and there's a little leg, but then you actually see it as like this really tall thing, and one of the furniture legs is broken off and it's kind of leaning up, tilted against the wall because of that leg being broken.
Wow. In 2 days?
Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, that's not the way that she got it.
You would hope so.
Right. I found this a really good deal.
It was free on Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah, so then they want to admit this picture, and the defense is objecting on relevance, and the prosecutor is saying, like, well, this shows that there was some sort of altercation, like some sort of struggle or something that happened in the house, and whoever broke the jewelry box was in the bedroom and obviously familiar with the house. And it's like there was a lot of supposition that you're having to make about that, saying, well, it shows that a struggle ensued and you aren't typically struggling when you're committing suicide. So, but she also didn't die in the bedroom, so I'm not sure that there's a direct link to those things. But interesting, the defense attorney says, I want that stricken from the record, and I want this declared a mistrial over the jewelry box.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay. So all of that gets stricken from the record. Well, the last statement about it shows a struggle ensued and you typically don't struggle when you're committing suicide, that gets stricken from the record.
But my understanding is that no one is saying it's suicide at this point.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that was like, what? I mean, you think that's worthy of a mistrial, that they heard something about the jewelry box and that it indicates some sort of struggle? You think that should be a mistrial? I don't know. That seems very strange. But they did not admit the picture into evidence.
Okay, well...
At that time, at least.
It's kind of like the Casey Anthony babysitter thing, where by the time it gets to court, that's not the story.
Right.
So, yes, he calls in and says he believes his wife committed suicide, but he's not still convinced that his wife committed suicide.
Right,
to exactly. Day, not arguing, no, I didn't do anything, she killed herself. Like,
right, I mean, it's clear that somebody killed her. Right. And so if there's evidence of a struggle in the house somewhere, even if that's in the bedroom, and then... Sure. Her body, like the death or her body ends up in the front room where she's dead. What's mistrial worthy over that? Because, she could have struggled with anybody.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm like,
the only thing it might indicate is the location of a struggle, not who struggled.
Right. And I think you could say, well, is there anything else that points to a struggle happening in that room? There's a whole bunch that you could call that into question as to whether or not that's evidence of a struggle or not. Right. So anyway, then they go back to Leah and her last interaction with her mom, which was that night around 7:00 when her mom was with Pam, her friend, who was driving her home to her house in Troy. She called her mom and said, hey, I'm upgrading my cell phone. My cell phone is on your plan, so they're going to need to call you to get this authorized for this change to be made because you're the owner of the plan. So keep your phone on, and you're going to need to answer so that you can, do this. So
expect a phone call.
Right, exactly. And then she calls her mom from U.S. Cellular 3 different times between like 7:20 and 7:30, and her mom never answers. So this has only been 20 minutes or so, and
the Leah is calling her those times?
Yes, okay. It's them calling to get the authorization to make this change, and she never answers. And then the last thing that the prosecution brings up is that, she did see Russ at the memorial service for her mom. There wasn't actually a burial, correct? And she's like, yeah. And then there were 2 different services for her at 2 different churches, and that kind of ends the questioning. So it leaves it hanging like, okay, like one service for her family, one service for Russ, or I don't know. But then the defense attorney gets up and he kind of starts with that and says, okay, so your mom, she grew up Catholic. And yes, she did. And then she and Russ started going to Morning Star Methodist Church. And so they had held a service at Morning Star, and then they'd also done Mass, the Catholic Church, for her family.
What do they mean she wasn't buried?
She was cremated.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So then he brings up, how much time did you actually spend around your mom and your stepdad? Because you weren't living at the house in Troy and you weren't around all that much. Yeah, true. And the defense attorney says, you heard your sister testify that after the diagnosis, your mom and dad or stepdad got along much better. Would you agree? And the prosecutor is like, hold up. That is a mischaracterization of that testimony. And, he's like, well, he says, well, she says she agreed with what her sister, said. And she says, no, I asked specifically, do you agree with your sister's reporting of the events that occurred between the 24th and the 27th, not about every statement that she made ever during her testimony?
Okay.
I mean, I looked back over the sister's testimony. I don't know if she ever did say, yeah, their relationship got better, because the only thing I could find was her saying, I couldn't tell you that, when she was asked about the relationship. So, but later I did put a reference to, maybe this sister and the younger daughter did agree that things had gotten better after the cancer diagnosis. So maybe she did somewhere and I just missed it when I went back. So then he moves on to, so you were living with your grandma at one point. Yes. You had some issues. So he wants to get back to the issues. Correct. And as a result of those issues, you got your car taken away that you and your mom had signed for. Yes. And then also your boyfriend didn't get along with your parents, or they didn't like her boyfriend. She doesn't respond because there's an objection and that question gets withdrawn. But
could it have been her boyfriend?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's what it seemed to me like. Okay, they had a bad relationship. They didn't get along with him, and Leah wasn't allowed to come over to the house if the parents weren't there.
Okay.
So I'm like, what are they saying? Like, is this drugs and the boyfriend maybe, or they came over together? I'm like, well, okay, they couldn't have because she was at US Cellular, but that the boyfriend came to try and take stuff from the house or something and ends up killing Betsy because she wasn't supposed to go home that night. That wasn't the plan. And Russ is typically every Tuesday night, he's out with his friends. So no one should have been there. Could he have been there?
The boyfriend.
The boyfriend. Yeah. Could he have been there in the house trying to steal things?
Sure.
And was interrupted. And then
he was trying to steal the jewelry box.
Exactly. Oops. Yeah.
It wouldn't fit in my car. I had to break the leg off.
And so then I went and put it back and leaned it up against the wall in the bedroom. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, are they trying to like set this up? Like, maybe the boyfriend killed her. Right. You had issues, but you were also at US Cellular. So I'm like, I don't know. Like, okay, well, you just talked to your mom and she agreed that she was going to have her phone on and she was going to answer because she knew she was expecting a call from you. And she says, yeah. And then he goes through like this whole timeline of, okay, so you called at 7:21 and then you called at 7:26 and then you called again at 7:30 and 06 seconds. He gives it down to the second and she's just like, like, I'm confused. I'm lost. She's just like, I don't know. She gets totally flustered by that. And he's like, okay, let's simplify. Let's go through this again. He's trying to get to times and she's, I don't know the time. I don't know times. It's confusing with the times. Time is confusing. I don't know the exact times. Like, she just very like, right. And he's like, okay, all right. Well, if I were to tell you that the times were 7:21, 7:26, and 7:30, would you argue with that? Just,
right. Is she? Would you say I never called her?
Right.
Or are
no,
you saying
impossible?
Like, I feel like those things. I'm like, yeah, I called her 3 times. If those are the times it said, then yeah, it was probably then.
Right. Right. And I think it is that if you're trying to ask me to testify to exact times that I called her, then I'm like,
am I in danger of perjury
right?
here?
Like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I called her 3 or 4 times. Like, I don't know. And it's like, well, if the cell phone records show that, then those are the times. And that matches up with I called her 3 or 4 times and she didn't answer.
Right.
Right. But he's wanting to get very specific, and that just flusters her. And then he wants to go back to the boyfriend. How come you, and Devin is the boyfriend's name, how come you didn't spend a lot of time with Russ? Because Russ didn't like him. And then...
What? A father doesn't like a boyfriend?
Yep. Issues.
Troubled.
Yeah, but the prosecutor brings up, like, okay, well, your mom, even though you had this trouble and these issues and Russ didn't like the boyfriend, your mom was still supporting you. She would still meet with you. She was giving you money. And did she tell you to keep that from Russ? Yes. Would Russ ever give you money? No. And also brought up there was this settlement money that was hers and that he wouldn't even give her that. And that's where they end the questioning. So the defense attorney goes into the settlement money right off and says, okay, so that settlement money, that was for you and your mom, correct? Yes. Okay.
Settlement money.
Yeah, it never says what the settlement was for.
But not like life insurance stuff.
No.
Okay.
So some sort of, I don't know, some sort of accident. I don't know, but some sort of settlement that they never say what the settlement was for. But her and her mom had gotten some settlement money that belonged to both of them and that it didn't belong to Russ. So, yes, her mom was giving her money, but it was the settlement money, not personal money. So the idea of her slipping Leah money without Russ's knowledge is not quite an accurate picture. It is like, okay, well, you had this settlement money. Russ didn't give it to you. Why? Well, Russ didn't have access to that money, or at least that's what, they're suggesting. And so, yeah, she was giving you that money and maybe she didn't want you telling Russ about it or something. I don't know. But
right. If she's potentially making not good life choices, it's possible like there could be that argument between them of, well, we shouldn't be supporting her because she's doing this, and it's like, well, it's her money and I can't not give her, and I, like a mom, and I so could be that, maybe.
Yeah, and because the prosecution asked about the boyfriend and why they didn't spend time together because Russ didn't like the boyfriend, so the defense attorney is like, well, so why'd you get your car taken away? And no, like relevance, we're not going into that. And he's like, well, hey, I mean, she got into the issue of Devin and why they didn't get along. It's like, hey, that has nothing to do with the car or...
It is a weird side, like, tangent to this all, I feel like.
Yes, right. Once he's not allowed to go down that road, then he's like, okay, I got nothing else. So he basically just gets the fact that the money that she's getting from Russ is settlement money and tries to say...
she's getting from her mom?
Yeah, that she was getting from her mom was settlement money and tries to get at, hey, didn't you think their relationship was better after she got cancer? But wasn't actually able to get that either.
Right.
And then we have Betsy's 2 sisters testify. They are pretty similar in their testimonies, so we'll keep that really brief. The first sister, the primary thing she says is that she didn't really like Russ, that she met him soon after Betsy started dating him, which would have been around 1998. And she'd see him at family gatherings and things like that. She felt like Russ spoke in a condescending way to Betsy. That was her impression. She didn't really like it. And then they talked about getting together for the holidays. And she says that on the 26th, Betsy didn't really seem like herself. She seemed really down and she kind of isolated herself from people. She took one of the nephews back into a bedroom and was just playing with him and not interacting with everyone, which she thought was not like her. And she was worried about her. She seemed really tired, not her cheery self. And I don't know, it kind of does make me wonder about, is there the idea of, well, she has this cancer diagnosis, that she's terminal, she's doing all this stuff. You have also made the assumption, if you'd been the one to find her, that she had committed suicide. Is that so far beyond the pale? She's sad, she's tired, she has this cancer diagnosis. Maybe she was acting in a way that someone might think that she had committed suicide.
Right. I feel like you're looking at this now through the lens of what's happened, and maybe not what you maybe noticed in the moment as well.
Right.
And then the other thing about like the thinking that it's suicide when you first come in is like, I don't know. I really don't know how I would react in a situation like that.
Right.
But I wouldn't love to look at gory things, so I might not be looking that close, but who knows? Right. You might also, if it's somebody you care about and you might hope there's something you can do, maybe you are not thinking about that. But
mistaking a murder for a suicide is not a crime, So
sure.
I feel like he does a bit trying to see, well, might you have also made that mistake? He's kind of going back to that quite a bit.
Oh, with the sisters, the defense attorneys?
Right. Yeah. And then also kind of the cremation decision and the 2 services and a bit of like, well, they had 2 different churches that Catholic, they wanted to do a certain thing, and the new church doing a certain thing. But she said that Russ is the one that announced that she was being cremated, and she'd never heard anything about that before. Like Betsy saying, exactly. And you would think if you're terminal, that might be something that you're talking about. So maybe, she was surprised.
Sure. But maybe not with everybody.
Sure.
But
yeah, for sure.
But it could definitely look suspicious as well.
Like, I want to make sure there's no way to come back and look at this body again later.
Yeah, unfortunately, you have someone cremated, they're going to do it after the autopsy and all of that. So it's not like you could we're going to do it now. But yeah, it avoids them coming back and looking again later. But
right.
They already looked.
Yeah. Right. And it's not like when they looked the first time they were thinking it was suicide and then, evidence comes out that maybe it was actually murder. Shoot, we should look at that again. It's like, well, they were already looking at it as a murder, and I don't know what else they would be trying to find later that they didn't find the first time. So, but the second sister, she has more direct testimony about domestic violence type of stuff, not physical violence, but more verbal violence. Her stepdaughter stayed the night over at Betsy and Russ's house with Betsy's 2 daughters. And she gets a call in the late morning from the girls, frantic because Russ is having a meltdown and they're scared. So she leaves for an early lunch and goes over there. And the defense tries to object to her testifying to that because she wasn't there. And she's like, well, I was present, or I became present because they called me. I left and I went over there, and so I can tell you what I saw when I got there, right? And she describes Russ laying on the bed, kicking his feet, like throwing a tantrum, like a toddler or something.
Weird.
Yeah. And using foul language, and the girls were like 11, 12 years old at the time. So she says again that he used the C word. So that seems to be a common theme, that everyone's saying that he was doing that. When he starts saying that, she calls the police and she gets the girls out of the house. She says when she was walking out of the house, she heard him say something like, "I'm going to cut her up into several pieces and bury her," or something like that, that like was really grotesque. She's not sure of the exact words.
Just you wait in 6 or 7 years.
Well, I mean, the hand was almost severed. Maybe he decided, this is too much work.
Yeah, that would be concerning.
Right. I mean, I think it's kind of like, okay, well, a long time ago, he made some reference to something that would use a knife, and then she ends up being killed by a knife. And so,
I mean, it's weird for someone to say they're going to kill their spouse in any way, no matter how they actually end up dying.
Right.
But then it's also just an extra morbid step to say, I'm going to cut you up into pieces. Like, that's gross.
Yeah.
Like,
that is gross.
One thing
and it would be
like,
alarming to hear someone say that. You're like, what? I mean, you know, like you might expect to hear someone say, like, well, I'm leaving you, or, I'm going to take everything.
It would be one thing to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to kill her.
Yeah, right.
Versus, I'm going to kill you and cut you up into little pieces. Right. It's like, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, like, yeah, okay. Well, and what had prompted this whole outburst was he and Betsy had just returned home from a marriage class. So something that came up in this marriage class triggered him and got him upset to where he was throwing this fit. So, like, I don't know. But the defense attorney, when he gets up, he's like, okay, yeah, but, and this is like what he said in his opening statement, that these reports of this violence were from 6 years ago or more, and there's nobody that's going to get up here and testify to more recent incidents than way back then, and then things had gotten better, right? So sure, that may have happened in the past, but no one can say that that was happening currently.
Sure.
Right.
And say what you want, but about a grown man throwing a temper tantrum on a bed and kicking his feet, it's not a temper tantrum that's violent and hurting someone.
Right. Just saying he's going to get violent, maybe.
Yeah.
But never, nobody ever says that he physically harmed her in any way. Just a lot of yelling.
Yeah. And strange, and it makes me go, okay, but yeah, I don't know. Definitely the one step over with the cutting you into pieces is like, well,
yeah, right. Yeah.
But
it's like, probably shouldn't say things like that.
Yes. Now, that would have to be in conjunction with a lot of other circumstantial evidence to mean anything, but yeah.
Right. I'm trying to think if I could imagine myself saying that phrase in a joking way, because sometimes the things that come out of my mouth, like, I actually might say something like that, but that's but I'm not proud of it. Okay, I'm not proud of it.
Well, I could see it, but not when you're actually angry.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I could see myself saying it as a joke. Not a very good one, I guess, but it is different, I feel, than if I was angry and said that.
For sure. The last thing he asked her is, well, do you feel like after the cancer diagnosis in 2009 that their relationship got better? And her response was, for a spell. But she doesn't ever say what she started noticing later, but she didn't feel like it was still better, And then it moves to Russ's mom. It's interesting when the prosecution is calling the family members of the defendant because, of course, they're not going to want to answer questions that might seem to support the state's case in any way.
Unless it could be extra compelling if it was a circumstance where it's like, well, you're the defendant's mom and you think they're guilty.
Right, sure.
Right. I guess you can call somebody to the stand and ask them questions even if they don't think that the defendant is guilty.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, and her testimony is really pretty short. It's basically like, okay, they had a Christmas thing at her house in the morning, and then she knew that they had something else later that evening that they went to. But it was primarily about Russ's alibi. So one of the things that the state thinks is suspect about his alibi is that he typically would go to his mom's house for dinner every Tuesday night, and then he would go to his friend's house to play this role-playing game. And once he finds out that Betsy is going to come home that night, instead of staying at her mom's house, he calls his mom and says, hey, I'm not coming to dinner tonight. I've got some errands I need to run. And so he doesn't go.
Does he run errands? And
he does run errands.
And are they suspicious errands?
Well, the state would say they seem strange. The places that he went, and it didn't seem to really make sense. So to them, they felt like he was intentionally trying to be seen or establish his presence somewhere else.
Yeah, because his mom couldn't say that he was home with her.
It's a stronger alibi if I'm seen on video other places instead of my mom saying, yeah, he came to dinner at my house, and they're like, okay, maybe not. Like, that's not a visible alibi, where going to these different stores and stuff is a visible alibi.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so we'll get into what those alibis were and where he went. We'll get into that a little bit later. But she says that it's this standing tradition. Tuesday nights, he would come over. If he wasn't going to make it, he would call her and let her know. And she says that he usually came 2 or 3 Tuesdays a month. He had called and told her he wasn't going to come. And they kind of draw out, did he tell you why he wasn't going to make it? She says, oh, he just had some errands to do. Okay, he couldn't make it because he had these errands. Yeah, and she says, well, I mean, usually if he calls me to say he can't come, I mean, I don't even know why, and it doesn't really matter to me. He's an adult. I just want to know if he's coming or not. So there's a little bit of weirdness about the fact that he specified why he couldn't come because he had errands to run.
Sure.
When the defense gets up, kind of the idea of like, maybe this wasn't so abnormal for him to not be going to his mom's. It's not like he went every single Tuesday, and then one Tuesday that Betsy happens to be murdered that he's called and canceled. You know, it's like, well, it doesn't seem like it was that odd. And
it's not that solid of a thing.
Right. And they'd just been over there for the holidays and stuff. So might have felt like, yeah, you know, I've got other stuff that I need to take care of. We just barely saw you. I'm not going to come. Mm-hmm. So I think he did a good job of kind of showing that that's probably not really indicative of anything either way. And it actually makes sense that he didn't go because they had just been together and yeah. Okay, now this is one that caused quite the stir in the courtroom, I would say.
Still his mom or somebody else now?
No, with someone else. Betsy. I'm like, I want to say Becky, and it's not. It's Betsy.
Isn't Betsy the girl who died?
Yeah.
Oh.
We get to Betsy's friend, Pam.
And now Betsy, we have a medium where she's going to tell us herself everything that happened.
Well, remember, I can feel her in the courtroom right now. She's going to tell you what to do. Anyway, so Betsy's friend, Pam, she was kind of a fiery back and forth with... Well, I mean, the prosecution, it was calm when she was testifying for them. When the defense got up, not so much. And then kind of some back and forth between redirect, you know, just back and forth. But she was with Betsy that last day and took her home. So she was the last person to see her besides whoever killed her. Mm-hmm. They met through work 10, 12 years previously.
Oh, okay.
And so they got to know each other at work and became close friends. And then were doing things together outside of work. Pam had some sort of injury, some accident that left her disabled. And so she wasn't
anymore.
Yeah, she wasn't
together,
able to. Right. She wasn't able to work, hadn't been able to work for about 4 years or so.
Was Betsy still working, like with the cancer stuff?
I don't think so. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. So...
She wasn't. She was playing tennis every day.
That's right. That's right. Betsy, according to Pam, said she wanted to just live every moment, be really active, and do stuff with the time that she had. Because Pam was not working, because she was on disability, then she spent a lot of time together with Betsy doing different things. So they got even closer over those last 4 years. She's actually the one who prompted Betsy to contact her doctor when she started having some symptoms, like she had some rapid weight gain of like 10 pounds and some bloating in her abdomen. And she said, you know, you should let your doctor know because this could be a sign of cancer spreading. And this was after she was in remission, and then she started having these symptoms. Sure enough, it had spread to her liver.
It was originally breast cancer?
Yeah. So she'd had a single mastectomy on the affected breast. So during this second round of chemotherapy, Pam was going to a lot of those chemotherapy sessions with her because she'd have to be there for hours. So family or friends would come and sit with her while she was receiving her treatment. She said she didn't go every time, but she went relatively frequently. She and Betsy had a long-standing tradition that they would get together for lunch on Christmas Eve, and then they would go their separate ways and do their whatever celebrations that they were doing with their families. But because Christmas Eve and Christmas Day fell on Saturday, Sunday that year, they ended up getting together on Friday because everyone's off work, so they had more stuff that was going on that weekend and probably Betsy's a little worn out. She doesn't want to be doing things all day long. So they met on Friday for lunch. Pam said she was super happy and everything seemed great. She seemed like she was doing really well. She was originally going to be Betsy's ride to chemo on Tuesday.
Which was the day
that she died.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, but then one of Betsy's mom's friends had come into town and was staying with Betsy's mom, and Betsy was also staying there. And she must have known her from previously. And she said, "Oh, I want to spend some time with her. She's going to drive me, or we're going to go over together to chemo, so you don't need to drive me there." But Pam had decided, well, I just want to make sure, because it sounded like maybe Betsy would have to drive her, and Bobby is the friend's name, over to chemo, and she just wanted to make sure she was feeling up to driving, and if she hadn't gone already, then she would drive both of them over there. So she stopped by Betsy's mom's house just to check. They'd already left, and then she went over to Betsy's chemo appointment and hung out with both of them and visited and whatever during the day. And then she went home and had dinner with her husband. Apparently, while she was at that chemo session, Betsy had decided, you know what, I'm kind of wiped out. Bobby was staying with her mom. She just was like, I just need to rest. I need some peace and quiet. I'm just going to go home. So she had messaged Russ earlier in the day, like before noon, about kind of plans and saying, oh, I'm going to come home to the Troy house. She'd asked him if he had his game that night, and he texts and checks in with some friends, and he messages back to her saying, yes, I've got a game, but I can pick you up afterwards, which I guess where they had moved from her grandparents or her parents' house was in that area where all the friend group was that got together to play games. But then when they moved to Troy, they moved further out. Mm-hmm. So when they were visiting friends and family, they were actually closer to where his game took place. Okay. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So the original plan was she was going to stay at her mom's, or the original plan was he was going to pick her up after the game night?
So the original plan was she was going to stay at her mom's, okay. And then she's like, actually, I want to come home. Okay. Do you have your game? And he said, yeah, I do. I'll pick you up after.
Gotcha.
And take you home. And then she decided while she was at chemo that she didn't really want to wait until 9 o'clock to get, well, it would be after that, because normally the game broke up at 9, and mm-hmm. she just didn't want to be that late. So she asked her friend if she would drive her home mm-hmm. later that evening. So Pam had gone home, eaten dinner, and had arranged to pick Betsy up at 6 from her mom's house and drive her back to Troy.
Okay. Where did Pam live?
She said that it was a 25-minute drive or so from her house to where Betsy lived.
I guess I would assume since they met at work, she probably lived closer to her mom's house than to Betsy's house.
Yeah, I think that's likely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she picks Betsy up she went over there at 6, but Betsy was playing a game with her mom and Bobby, and so she kind of hung out until they were finished with their game, and said she did just seem really tired and down a little bit. So then they left for Troy. Betsy had messaged Russ to say, hey, Pam's going to bring me home. You don't need to pick me up. So I'll see you at home later. When they got to the house, there were a couple phone calls. So she'd gotten that phone call from Leah about upgrading her phone.
Mm-hmm. Which she answered, that person.
Yes, which she answered. And then when they got to the house, they called Tam's husband saying, oh, we got here. Betsy wanted to wish him Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, etc. So they'd chatted for a minute, and that was at 7:04. Betsy wanted Pam to stay the night. Mm. And Pam was like, I've never stayed the night at someone's house since I've been married. That just feels a little weird to me, but it was not uncommon for Betsy to have people stay over at her place.
I was like, that would be a weird coincidence, though. If it was like they're friends, and then this is the first time she's asked you to stay the night, and it's the night she dies. But I guess if she says she has people stay the night, but again, if they've been friends that long, and then it's weird if this is like the first that's happened. Like, I'm
not sure if it was the first time she asked her, but she's like, I just never have stayed over at anyone's house Since I've been married, I haven't been away from my husband like that,
Right.
staying at a friend's house. So she was like, yeah, I don't really want to, but
Well, either maybe she's glad she didn't, or she wishes she had.
right. Yeah, you never know how it would have gone if she had been in the house when whatever went down. I don't know.
Or would it have gone down?
Right. Yeah. Betsy wanted to show her Christmas present, that jewelry box. And
The jewelry box.
chest.
What's with the jewelry box?
I know, the jewelry chest or whatever. So she agreed to come into the house, and she said they walked up to the door. All the lights are off, including the porch light. The front door was unlocked, which Betsy didn't seem surprised by that. And they go in. The dog rushes to greet them. Pam says she's intimidated by the dog. It's a chow mix, and they can be really possessive and aggressive towards people that are non-family members. They're pretty big, beefy dogs, and I think it might have been a German Shepherd chow mix.
It looks like a bear.
Yeah, and they're
Cute. Like a chubby husky.
yeah. So, and one that would kind of like leap at the windows and come at the door. And so she just felt nervous around the dog, and he was jumping up on their legs and stuff like that. And so,
Wonder where the dog was when all this happened then.
well, Betsy took him outside and put him on a lead. They didn't have a fenced yard, and so she just attached the dog to the lead and left it outside. They went down to Betsy's bedroom to see the jewelry case.
Jewelry chest.
Jewelry chest.
Yeah.
Betsy was trying to still convince her to stay the night, and she was like, no. And then she was trying to convince her, well, stay and watch a movie with me. Her understanding was that Russ was going to come home before the movie ended, and she just didn't really feel comfortable with Russ. And so she didn't want to stay and interact with him. And she'd said earlier in her testimony that she had met Russ, and she did feel like he was kind of degrading to her. And nobody in their friend group really liked him. And so they kind of avoided doing anything with Betsy and Russ together. And she said Betsy was pretty upset with her that she wouldn't stay and she couldn't convince her. So she left the house. She was like, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes later. She wasn't sure exactly how long she was there, but Betsy was getting ready to watch a movie and had a blanket and stuff to curl up on the couch. And after she left, she tried calling Betsy. Like, she was upset with her. She said usually she gets over things quickly, but she just wanted, like, hey, sorry, I hope you're okay, whatever.
Okay.
And Betsy didn't answer. And this is kind of in the same time frame that Leah would have been calling too about the cell phone. So at first, during the prosecutor's questioning, it did seem like maybe she was there later, and I was wondering, well, if she was there with Betsy, why wasn't she answering those calls? That doesn't seem right. But then when they actually go to the phone records, she had called, I think at like 7:26 or something like that.
Pam had
called her, and the other calls were 7:21, 7:26, and 7:31 as far as Leah calling.
1 and 6 seconds.
Yeah, 30 and 6 and 10, whatever. Yeah, so I'm like, okay, I guess it was kind of all in that window that Leah was calling that Pam had also called. And she didn't answer any of those calls. So I think she said she tried one other time a little bit later. And then she called Betsy's mom to say, I'm worried about her. She was upset with me. I've tried calling. She's not answering. Which I think is a little bit weird, you know?
That's weird.
Yeah.
It's not like it's been days.
Right.
Like, I would be like, okay, whatever. I'll give you the night and we'll talk about it tomorrow maybe or something. I don't know. That's weird.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit weird. I don't know why she would feel like she needed to get in touch with Betsy's mom for that reason. But then she went to bed, and around 6 a.m. is when the police came to her house to question her, and she found out that something had happened to her. So cross-examination. I'm like, everybody's killing Betsy. I mean, it was Leah's boyfriend, and now it's jumping to Pam?
Yeah.
Like, wait, what? I mean, do you really believe that Pam killed her?
Right.
Yeah, it just seems odd. So he wants to bring up, like, how many times did you actually interact with Russ to base this opinion of their relationship? And apparently when she had talked to the police, she had said something like she met him maybe 3 times or something in the 10 years that they'd been friends. So as far as like real, not, I don't know if met, but hung out with him.
I mean, I guess I could see that. I don't have a ton of friends that I interact with socially, but the one friend that I do, we interact with her husband all the time. But my friends from work will get together and do stuff, but I don't often see their spouses. I have seen some of them. I don't know. But as far as like if you're going to each other's houses, you would think.
Right. And it did seem like they did things together outside of the house more often than like going to lunch and going out to, you know, do this and
That's
that.
normal.
So not really hanging out at the house, but the defense attorney is kind of like, so can you really base your opinion, like say that he was degrading to her and whatever by 3 interactions over 10 years? And she said, yeah, I felt that way when I was around him, which made me not want to be around him. And then hearing reports from Betsy and other friends about him that she kind of based that opinion on.
Sure.
Definitely calling into question how much can you trust that assessment from her of Russ, because she didn't actually interact with him very many times.
Yeah, like that's not crazy to me to say, well, I don't know, I didn't like my interactions with him. Well, you haven't had that many, but yeah, so I don't know.
And I think the combination of the two, saying, yeah, what I saw when I did interact with him, I didn't like, and then I hear reports and she's telling me about stuff and I'm like, you know, I don't really want to be around him more based on what I know.
Right.
But then it was kind of, okay, this is where he gets into the like, Pam, you're acting creepy, you're suspicious, or you're like, with the chemo thing, she already told you that she didn't need a ride. But you decided to go over to her mom's house anyway, just to check. So were you trying to track her down? She's like, track her down? No, I knew she was going to chemo. I didn't need to track her down. I just wanted to make sure she actually was able to get over there okay. And when I saw she was already gone, then I went over to chemo, right? And then, okay, well, so she asked you if you would take her to Troy. Did you know she already had a ride and she didn't actually need a ride out there?
Well, it seems like she wanted to go earlier than what would have been if Russ picked her up anyway, so...
Yeah, and I guess this answers the question. Her mother's house is pretty close to your house, yes. So she lived pretty close to Betsy's mom.
Yeah, so it wouldn't have been weird for her to go home, eat dinner, and
come back. Yeah. So then he says, so you drove to her mother's house and found out she didn't need you to take her, and yet you took her anyway? She's like, yeah, because she asked me if I could just take her, and then she would tell Russ. And he's like, tell Russ what? Well, that she has a ride. Right. You know, she wanted...
Change of plans.
Yeah, she wanted to go. And so it's kind of like, you're overstepping. Why? Why would you take her home when she already had a ride and then you insisted, you know... Why? Because you wanted to get her alone and kill her? I don't know. It's just kind of weird. There was a lot about her testimony with the detectives when they first came to the door that morning.
Her interview or whatever.
So I guess she had actually called at 7:27. I was wrong. Leah called it 7:26.
Oh.
Pam called it 7:27.
So literally right in that same time frame.
Yeah, and so apparently she wasn't there as long as she thought she was, because 7:04 she talks to her husband, 7:27 she's trying to call Betsy, so she must have been at the house a shorter period of time. I guess initially she'd said that she hadn't gone into the house.
Okay.
Or that's the way that the defense is presenting it. You said you didn't go in the house, and then you said, oh yeah, actually I did go in the house, and you told him these detailed places of where you went in the house. And she said, well, you know, I hadn't planned on staying in the house. She was saying, well, when they asked her a general question, and she's like, oh, I drove her over, I dropped her off. She wasn't thinking they were asking about whether or not she went into the house.
Whether she stepped foot
but
inside.
Just, I dropped her off and I went home, is what she said initially, right?
Okay.
And so he's taking that as... You told them you didn't go into the house, and then later you told them that you did, and she said, well, my understanding of the question was this, and then when they asked me more detail, then I told them that I had gone into the house to look at this stuff and whatever. And then she talked to her brother while the police officers were there, and she'd made some comment about something happened to Betsy last night, but then later at the end of the interview, she said something about, like, when did this happen? This morning? And so he's like, why did you say earlier that something happened last night, but but then you ask them if something happened this morning, and I'm like, well, oh, you know, I don't know.
All right, it's like, I guess she can maybe infer because she called and she never answered, but I don't know.
Right. He is definitely pushing her on, well, do you recall saying this? And she's like, no, I don't really. Well, if I showed you the transcript, would that refresh your memory? She's like, no. No. No, I'm not going to lie. Well, you know, I don't know. It was just really aggressive back and forth. And yeah, and then the other thing was that she'd called to tell Betsy that she was home, but you couldn't have been home at 7:27 because your house is 30 minutes away. You had that phone call while you were at Betsy's house. Mm-hmm. Now it's only 23 minutes later. You couldn't possibly have been home, and yet you told the police that you were calling to tell her that you were home. And she says, well, that's not what I meant by it. I'm not that familiar with Troy. And I guess she hadn't lived there that long at that point because it was their first Christmas there. Right. And they had moved in the summer. She's saying, well, sometimes I get turned around and I had a hard time getting out of there. So when I get out and like, okay, now I know where I am, I'm home free kind of thing. All right, I made it. Okay. You know, that's how she was thinking of it. And that's what she would say to Betsy. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm home. You know, even though she didn't mean she was literally at her house.
Okay.
Is how she's claiming what she meant by it, right?
Sure. It's weird to say, well, I called her to tell her this, but then later say, well, I called because she might have been mad at me and whatever,
right.
But
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like,
inconsistent.
Well, so you said you called to see if she was mad at you, correct? And then yet you told the police the next morning that you called when I got home to tell her I was home. And she's like, that's not what you said. Are you certain? No, you're not certain. You know, I mean, it's just like this, I don't know, back and forth about it.
And this happened like 2 years later because it was like 2011.
Yes. And then he also brings up that with the dog jumping on her, was it wet outside? Later, there's what the CSI techs believed to be a bloody paw print on her sweatpants or on her pants that she was wearing. So kind of like, well, could the dog have jumped up on her and put a muddy paw print on her pants?
Muddy or bloody?
Right. Those are two different things. And that's like, that will be discussed in, that was quite the interview too, when it comes to that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then, well, you said she was cuddled up on the couch. And then you said the last time you saw her was standing at the door waving goodbye to you, you know, so, and maybe it's just trying to discredit her, but what testimony does she have to share that needs to be discredited? She drove Betsy home and she dropped her off. The lights are all off. The front door was unlocked. I mean, the interesting thing though is at the very end, he asked her about the jewelry case, if the leg was already broken when she saw it.
Oh.
And she says yes.
Okay. So what didn't ensue from a tussle that was related to her death.
Right. And it's like, okay, well,
how did it break?
I'm like, did Betsy seem surprised that it was broken? Did she, you know, I'm like,
was somebody hiding in the house?
Right, like, exactly. It's like, you would think if it's like, wait, what happened? Why is this like, you know, that she would have made some comment. When did it get broken and why is she not acting surprised that it's broken? It's kind of weird. Sometime between the 25th and when Pam saw it on the 27th around 7 p.m., it was broken. And there's no indication from what she said that seemed to be a surprise or something that Betsy didn't know about already.
Weird.
So, and I was kind of thinking, I wonder if they had to move it from a family member's house to get it back to their house and maybe something happened as they were moving it. But no, they were at their own house when she got it. So
yeah, weird.
Wouldn't be that. But maybe it was when they were moving it to the bedroom. Maybe something happened. I don't know. Anyway, there was a redirect that they kind of, okay, let's clarify. This is what you said and you were meaning this. And okay, yes, all right. They reestablished that. And then we have a recross where he's like, well, so you said you didn't go into the house, right? And she's like, that's not how I worded it. Did you go into the house? No. And she says, no, I did go in the house. And then you changed it and you said you did go in the house. I did not change it. You just rephrased it and said that you went in the house. And she says, you would have liked me to have said it like that, but that's not true, Mr. Schwartz. It's just like they are after each other about it. You know, like, I didn't say it like that. How did you say it? I would have said it just like, you know, I mean, it's just back and forth arguing with each other about it. She says, would you like me to say that again? You know, you know, and he's like, go ahead, say it again. And she's like, that's all right. You can hear the recording. You know, I mean, she's just not having it. You are trying to make this untrue picture of what I said and twisting it and taking it out of context. And she is just, no, I'm not. I am not having that. The state comes back up and just re-clarifies.
Once again.
Yes. But boy, that was like, what do you think? Do you really think that Pam did this?
Right.
I mean, what other... You said it was something happened last night, and then you said, did it happen this morning? And, you know, you seem to have had prior knowledge. I'm like, man, maybe she and the boyfriend did it together. Right. Like, what the... I don't know. It's just like, yeah, quite the interesting, aggressive tactic by him. And here's the final moments that we know of Betsy's life. Yeah. Right? Then no one sees her again. So last we know, she was on the couch getting ready to watch a movie.
Or waving goodbye on the porch.
Yeah. And nobody ever talks to her again after that point. Mm-hmm. And when her body is found, she does have a blanket partially over her legs. Even though she is on the living room floor, dead, there's blood on the arm of that sofa where she was probably laying, watching TV, and then ended up on the floor where she died. So that matches up with the idea that she was getting ready to watch a movie. The weird thing to me is, could someone have been in the house with them? Which is kind of creepy to think about.
Really creepy.
You know, she didn't go into all the rooms, and they have a basement. Could have been down in the basement. But all the lights were off, and the dog wasn't acting like there was a stranger in the house.
Right.
Or if she put the dog outside and someone sees Pam leaving the house, do they come in the house? But I'm like, well, where would they have come in? If they came in the front door, she would have seen them, and unless she knew the individual. And the knife that she was stabbed with was from their own butcher block.
Okay.
That is a steak knife, not even like a butcher knife, a long carving knife. No, it was a steak knife.
Like a serrated steak knife.
Not serrated even.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so how did they get that? You know, so someone would have had to go into the kitchen, get that knife, and come and attack her, which they couldn't have done
if
they just barely entered the house, right? That wouldn't have...
Right. Yeah, no, that's...
So it is a little bit of a mystery as to...
Well, and you wouldn't... Pam coming in, that is a person coming in, so the dog would be maybe focused on that too, so you wouldn't be able to tell, are you acting weird because of this or that, and then she puts the dog outside, so
right.
I don't know, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know if someone could have gotten into the house when the dog was there on its own and not have the dog be agitated. Like, would he have attacked a stranger coming into the house if they entered before Pam and Betsy came home? Mm-hmm. Does seem a little bit strange unless they did go downstairs or I don't know, like, did they... It's a mystery.
Yeah.
Because, it does seem very strange, and it does seem like the death occurred very soon after Pam left. Or there was some sort of attack going on that she wasn't answering the phone at 7:21 onward.
Right.
It does kind of seem like whoever it was in the house already.
It's creepy.
Yeah, which is really creepy to think that you were in there. She's trying to convince you to stay and watch a movie. The killer is waiting in the house somewhere. Mm-hmm. And you leave and your friend gets killed right afterwards.
Ooh.
Yeah. So,
do they think she was dead at the time of those phone calls? I mean, she could have fallen asleep watching a movie or something. She was tired. Her friend could have been in the other room or something.
Right. I think the reason they're saying it's odd is because she knew to expect a call. The phone company or Leah was going to be calling about upgrading her phone. And so the likelihood that she would have just ignored that seems low.
Right.
So it does seem that she wasn't able to answer the phone at that time. Whether she was actually dead at that time or she was under attack or something at that time, we don't know. But it does seem like it happened around that time frame.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy to think about that scenario and, like
Don't
that's
like
our
it.
worst nightmares. Everyone imagines that someone's in your house when you come home. And I don't know. Obviously, her front door was unlocked. Anyone could have gone in there.
True.
So next time we are going to hear the 911 call from Russ. We're going to hear from she actually is not the person who took the 911 call. She's like the director or something for the call center. And she gives her opinion about Russ's demeanor on the call. And then we'll jump into the law enforcement side of the case in our next episode.
Okay. I can't wait.
Yikes. Yeah.
In the meantime, if you have any sort of suggestions for cases at all, to email us. I should probably tell you our email is hungthepodcast@gmail.com. So go ahead and connect with us there if you like. Also, just started up on YouTube, so you can listen to us there as well. And you can follow our Instagram, Hung Podcast, and TikTok. Are we posting on TikTok?
TikTok does not like our name. It does not like our logo. It doesn't like, it just keeps blocking me anytime that I try and.
Speaking of that, the John Benet Ramsey person didn't like our logo either.
Yeah, that ugly rope.
That ugly noose.
Oh, that ugly noose.
She was like, you can do a John Benet case, and if you use a picture of her instead of that ugly noose, LOL.
Yeah, like I can understand why it's like, yeah, okay, maybe that's not a very comfortable look for everybody. So maybe we'll have to rethink the logo.
I think if you're listening to true crime, you're used to being uncomfortable in those ways anyway, so.
That's right.
But
creepy is a good thing in true crime. Yeah. Well, once again, thank you for hanging out with us today, and we hope that you join us next time. Until then,
I'm Maryn.
I'm Christy.
And you've been listening to Hung.